The Transcontinental Railroad and its legacy on the Brooklyn Bridge, presented by Group K. The Transcontinental Railroad serves as a means of unifying the nation previously isolated by the rugged terrain and transited transportation by linking the east and westward portions of the United States. The Transcontinental Railroad proposed a resolution to reduce the 6-month travel time around Cape Horn and escape the risk of disease and elemental dangers that mark the trail west. The Pacific Railroad Act of 1862 sparked the race between the Union Pacific and Central Pacific Railroad companies to construct a railroad expanding from Sacramento, California to Omaha, Nebraska. The Transcontinental Railroad was completed on May 10, 1869, preceding the Brooklyn Bridge by 14 years.
Transcontinental Railroad and Brooklyn Bridge both acted as a catalyst for a union of American territories. The railroad led to the merger of the eastern and the western regions of the United States. Construction of the bridge led to the birth of the most important commercial metropolis in the United States by connecting the independent cities of Brooklyn and New York. The Brooklyn Bridge was a demonstration of American ingenuity, representing a leap into the future and the conquest of nature. The bridge was termed a final connection in the continental system, succeeding the railroad system. The Transcontinental Railroad and the Brooklyn Bridge were both symbolic of optimism for the United States at their time of construction.
The lead engineer of the Union Pacific Railroad Company was Grenville Dodge, and the lead engineer of the Central Pacific Railroad Company was Thomas Judah until his death. Following his death, the Big Four appointed Samuel Montague as chief engineer. The greatest challenge they faced, and more specifically the Central Pacific Railroad Company, was blasting through the Sierra Nevada mountains, something not yet done in the nation. The summit tunnel of this several-tunnel project was the most challenging. Using black powder to blast through the granite and rock would yield sometimes only inches a day. The most efficient way was to blast through from the inside and out until British chemists introduced nitroglycerin. This transformed the engineering and technical fields, yielding about 2 feet a day, roughly doubling their original rate.
The story of the Brooklyn Bridge parallels that of the Transcontinental Railroad. Envisioned by President Lincoln, the Transcontinental Railroad served to unify the western states of California, Nevada, and Oregon with the eastern states. What both the Brooklyn Bridge and Transcontinental Railroad came to represent, though, became far more important: optimism, American expansion, and technological innovation. In years to come, thousands of immigrants would ride the rails westward to homestead land. The country embraced the completion of such an endeavor, but such a feat of engineering had its critics and hidden corruption. The railroad started America onto a path of designing monuments according to what Montgomery Schuyler would designate the Brooklyn Bridge as cultural text of unfinished meaning, of pure utilitarian treatment.
The Brooklyn Bridge and the first Transcontinental Railroad were designed and constructed to optimize their respective abilities to connect lands and meet differing needs. Although their initial idea of foundation, length, location, date of construction, and purposes were all different, they collectively connected our society in a wide range of aspects. In conclusion, the main differing points consisted of the idea that the Transcontinental Railroad served as a metaphorical bridge that would transport soldiers, goods, supplies, and people across the east and west coast, provided they would purchase their ticket, while the Brooklyn Bridge mainly eased transportation for laborers from Brooklyn to Manhattan.
The Transcontinental Railroad had many problems and challenges. Corruption, which included the exploitation of government funding and profit scandals, most notably the Credit Mobilier scandal, were key failures of the railroad construction system. In addition, safety hazards, including the use of explosives and Native American attacks, put the workers' lives at stake. The Brooklyn Bridge had many problems that paralleled those of the Transcontinental Railroad. It was subject to corruption, mainly by Boss Tweed, who offered bribes for the bridge's bond issue. Between the two projects, the bridge had a semi-improved caisson structure compared to the railroad's workers being lowered in baskets, but still resulted in approximately 27 worker deaths.
Overall, when the project was completed, the press coverage was overwhelmingly positive. In the end, a large majority of it tended to overlook the cost. America as a whole celebrated with ceremonies in places such as Chicago and Philadelphia. The main ceremony was in Utah, where the two previously competing railroads met. Just like with the opening of the Brooklyn Bridge, there was a ceremony with key political figures involved. Both ceremonies had at least some level of inclusion of the president. President Arthur attended the opening ceremony of the Brooklyn Bridge, while President Grant was sent the first telegraph indicating the railroad had been completed. The inclusion of these political figures in the opening ceremony indicated to the people that these projects had a high level of importance to the nation as a whole. The railroad perpetuated one of the great cultural transformations that began forming after the Industrial Revolution. The competition between the two railroad companies to build tracks encouraged both speed and efficiency, and in 6 short years the railroad was completed, illustrating the benefits of this new economic culture in which competition leads to a betterment of society. Intellectual culture was transformed as well. In addition to commercial goods, the railroads carried books, ideas, and travelers from coast to coast, forming a national culture in which people from the East and West were now easily connected and could identify with one another in a way that truly promoted American unity and optimism.
The workforce used to build the railroad was comprised of anywhere from 6,000 to 10,000 men. Of these men, 9 out of 10 were Chinese. Pay for working on the railroad was $31 a month, none of which was used for room and board. White laborers were paid $35 a month with room and board included. White laborers were also given less labor-intensive assignments while working on the railroad. On June 25, 1967, a small strike began in one of the Chinese labor camps. The Chinese laborers were demanding a raise to $40 a month and a max of 10-hour workdays. As word of the strike spread, the wage demanded was increased to $45 a month. After a week, the strike was discontinued as food supplies to the camps were cut off.
Overall, both projects proved to be great innovations of their time. The railroad preceded the bridge by only 14 years, making the 19th century an exciting time for engineering and transportation. These projects played a huge role in connecting the American people both literally by providing efficient transportation methods and metaphorically by serving as a symbol of unity and hope.